Over 4 decades, Aberdeen has built deep relationships throughout emerging market economies. And each episode of our Emerging Markets Equity podcast is your chance to eavesdrop on an agenda-setting conversation between me, Nick Robinson, and some of our brightest minds, figuring out the opportunities in key emerging markets. Search for the Emerging Markets Equity podcast from Aberdeen. That's ABRDN, wherever you get your podcasts.
On today's Smart 7, Labour sets out 6 new milestones, Macron won't quit French presidency, and much more. It's Friday, 6th of December, it's National Microwave Day, and happy birthday, Susie Wolf.
The Smart 7. It's news, but not the news.
Thursday saw Labour leader and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer set out new priorities for his government. It's seen as a bid to reset the conversation after a budget that has attracted criticism from farmers and employers, along with the winter fuel allowance cuts that impacted pensioners. He said it's time for a change in mentality and a focus on getting things done.
That is my plan for change, the driving purpose of this government, and we will stay the course. We will fix the foundations, repair the damage, reform government, and rebuild Britain through the power of change.
He announced 6 new milestones, which included higher household income, more house building, improvements in the NHS, education, clean power, and a new plan to put more police on the streets. There were immediate questions as to why migration was not on the list, but Home Secretary Yvette Cooper said this is not about migration targets, but about a new focus on policing.
We've got this real persistent problem with criminal gangs that have been allowed to take hold along the channel, undermining our border security and putting lives at risk with these small boat crossings. We're determined to go after the criminal gangs, and that's also part of the plan for change.
The reaction to Labour's new vision was mixed. Starmer delivered it from Pinewood Studios, making a joke about Kemi Badenoch's working-class job at McDonald's and suggesting if he stayed on for long enough, he might be offered the role of James Bond. Badenoch responded saying the speech showed that Labour had not been ready for government. One of the major themes was a focus on neighbourhood policing and adding 13,000 more bobbies to the beat. But Tory Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philps says there's nothing particularly new in that either.
Clearly, I support having named contact officers, but it's not a particularly new thing because every ward in my constituency in London has a Safer Neighbourhoods sergeant who's in charge of that ward team and is available to and contactable by the public.
Former HM Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Zoe Billingham says the idea of a more locally focused police force is a tried and tested one that got swamped by Tory cutbacks.
We know that that's worked in the past. It worked in the 2000s. It got completely eroded during austerity. And I think this is really good news. It's a tried and trusted approach to policing that puts neighbourhood policing in the heart of the communities.
There was controversy on Thursday as Amnesty International published a report into Israel's war on Gaza that found Israeli forces had brazenly, continuously and with total impunity unleashed hell on the local population. The conclusion was that while the Hamas attacks which sparked the war were atrocities, they could not justify what was described as genocide. The local Israeli office of Amnesty disagreed with that finding, but did agree that serious crimes were taking place which need investigation. The Israeli reaction was immediate, with the Foreign Ministry describing the report as entirely false and based on lies. Amnesty International Secretary-General Agnes Callamard says the conclusions are clear and evidence-based.
We looked at the entire context, one of apartheid, dispossession, military occupation, and the only reasonable conclusion we could make is that Israel intended to commit genocide.
This week has seen a lot of political turbulence around the world, with democracy protests nightly in Georgia, a presidential election recount in Romania, and a brief period of martial law in South Korea, which could see the president impeached. France also hit a rocky patch as the ruling coalition fell apart, and former EU diplomat Michel Barnier had to tender his resignation on Thursday morning. He's now one of the shortest-serving prime ministers in recent French history, but still survived for 2 Liz Trusses. His resignation causes a serious problem for President Macron, who can't call another parliamentary election until next year, but he pledged to find a new PM in an address to the nation on Thursday evening and vowed not to resign.
The mandate that you democratically entrusted to me is a 5-year mandate, and I will exercise it fully until its end. Because the planet is moving forward, because the challenges are numerous, and because we must be ambitious for France, we cannot afford division or inaction.
Still to come on today's Smart 7, it's the final chapter for Formula One, and we have news on Rihanna's new album, Bad News, right after this.
Over 4 decades, Aberdeen has built deep relationships throughout emerging market economies. And each episode of our Emerging Markets Equity podcast is your chance to eavesdrop on an agenda-setting conversation between me, Nick Robinson, and some of our brightest minds, figuring out the opportunities in key emerging markets. Search for the Emerging Markets Equity podcast from Aberdeen. That's ABRDN, wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back.
Thursday night saw 2 more games in the Premier League, with Fulham beating Brighton 3-1 and Bournemouth stunning Spurs with a 1-0 win, which leaves Spurs in 10th. This weekend is the last Grand Prix of the current season, and it will see the Constructors' Championship decided between most likely McLaren and Ferrari. It also seems like we might be entering a new crankier era of Formula One, as Mercedes' George Russell had a proper go at Red Bull's Max Verstappen on Thursday. This weekend is Lewis Hamilton's last race with the German team before he switches to Ferrari next year, but he was sounding positively mellow about everything.
Going through a season together with so many people, you not only on those race weekends you're riding the highs and lows together, but in their personal lives, through marriages, through divorces, through all sorts. You're going through these journeys with these people, so it's a really beautiful journey you go on together. Being that it was so long, the emotions run so deep.
If you've been hoping and praying that Rihanna might drop that much talked about 9th album as a kind of Christmas present for the world, I have bad news. She was out and about for Baby Daddy A$AP Rocky's award at what's known as the Shoe Oscars. It was an event called the Annual Footwear Awards, and he was honoured for his Puma collection. Riri says she and he are very busy with their 2 kids, RZA and Riot, and that means there's no sign of new music in 2024 and possibly 2025.
How has motherhood affected you creatively for making music?
Oh, it's impacted it greatly. It's a new priority, you know. My kids are my priority. Music comes second to that.
It's definitely getting close to Christmas when the trailer for the Doctor Who Christmas special drops, and this year's looks like it could be, well, a cracker. The Doctor, played by Ncuti Gatwa, meets up with a new character called Joy, who is played by Nicola Coughlan of Derry Girls and Bridgerton fame. Joy accidentally checks into a time hotel and uncovers a fiendish plot to destroy the Earth, which means only the Doctor can save the day. It's on BBC One on Christmas Day at 5:10, so save some space on the sofa.
How do I get to be you?
You'll find out.
Who are you?
You'll find out.
What do I do? Where do I go?
We'll find out.
Oh, do you see? You have to be mysterious all the time. That's why everyone leaves you. That is why you were always alone.
Promises to keep.
We can do this.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes and we'll give you the world.